You are listening to Imperfect Fifth, a podcast, offbeat conversations with music industry humans that we love. Today's episode is brought to you by Easy Visibility. Let Aaron Zimmerman be your visibility guide and visual storyteller, currently serving entrepreneurs globally. And by Double Take Productions. We have no tagline, we're just twins who have been taking photos, shooting and editing film, event planning, and more together since 2010. Be sure to nab your Rainbow Kitten Surprise hoodie or crop sweatshirt in our shop. Check out imperfectfifth.com/merch to see all of our current merchandise options, including small batch handmade earrings. Today, we have the pleasure of sitting down with Cole Guerra. The brainchild of musical project I Am Casting, his latest release, Carnival Barkers, gained widespread praise. We get to chat a bit about the album and its inspiration, as well as some offbeat topics like what aliens might think of America today. Keep listening for more.
My name's Cole Guerra. I'm kind of at the helm of a project that goes by the name of I Am Casting. So there's a new record called Carnival Barkers, just came out a few days ago. It's the debut from I Am Casting, but I've had some stuff put out earlier. It's been a while, but I had a solo record under my own name called Scarves Knives, and then playing with other folks on other people's projects prior to that. So, yeah.
Yeah. We actually did a little bit of research, of course, and have heard your work before with I Am Casting, and I was just very excited that the new album came out. And now you've got like this full story to share with the world instead of just like a couple of singles. We were curious to see how everything panned out. How exciting is it now that your debut with this project is out in the world?
Oh, it's great. Hopefully the world, at least some small fraction of the world receives it kindly and actually listens a bit. I think the music itself lends itself to multiple listens. I don't know that it's the type of thing. You mentioned singles coming out. I almost didn't put out any singles other than the sort of maybe advantages from a getting word out standpoint. I know that my music tends to read more as album-like and benefits from listen. So hopefully, what I've put out there will be met by some interested listeners. But yeah, excited. I think the big thing for me is I'm already back into even writing new music. So my hope is this is the beginning of several I Am Casting projects that come out over the next few years. Wasn't the case for me before. I kind of took a long break. And so I think one of the most exciting things for me at this point is I kind of see a route forward in terms of continuing to stay much more fully engaged on the music side of things than I have been over the last few years. So looking forward to that.
That's so exciting. Well, we're looking forward to having you back.
Right. We'll book it right now. I'll be back in 8 months.
Yeah. Yes, we could do it every 8 months. We could do it 8 and then 4. Just come hang out whenever you want.
Well, I work better on deadline, Meredith. So if I know I have, a commitment to a podcast or something, I'm sure that'll get another batch of 10 songs done.
My kind of person. I totally operate that way.
I'll pull an all-nighter. It'll be an all-nighter. The last 5 tunes will all be written the week of, right?
So, and then you have an interesting story with it. There you go. Fun enough.
Right. Exactly.
So I do want to kind of go back just to the root of it all, just very, very, very briefly. I was wondering, what was the first song or album that you remember hearing, and does that work of art have any influence on how you approach your work today?
So I'd be lying if I said I really remember the first thing. I'll tell you what jumps to mind for me is probably would have been exposure even before I was hearing stuff on the radio to whatever was at home, of course. And my mom in particular was into a lot of 60s stuff. So early Beatles, I remember her playing a lot of John Denver, Peter, Paul and Mary, Beach Boys.
Yeah.
So that was probably the kind of stuff that's clearly what I would have been hearing first. And I have memories of all that. I just don't know what was first. I remember those sitting in front of the record player at home with those albums sort of in my hands. And she actually tells stories. I can't really vouch to having a real good memory of this, but even in preschool days, when there'd be time where you could do free play. So I would have been 3, 4 years old before kindergarten or something. I would be over. They had an old record player, and I would just go over to the record player and put on tunes. So I was kind of antisocial listening to music. So I don't know what those albums were. It would have been, I remember when I was growing up, the actual albums I would have heard in the car, like that would be the other memory, would be hearing stuff in the car driving, with my parents. My dad wasn't really into music, so it was more my mom, but it would have been sort of, I know I had a lot of exposure to kind of, I guess Beatles influence stuff, but late 70s, early 80s, think about sort of the stuff on the radio then. So it would have been like, Hall & Oates, Styx. I actually remember, actually having a Styx album called Cornerstone. It had been out for a little while, but had a song called Babe, I'm Leaving, kind of soft rock. Actually thinking Babe, I'm Leaving, that reminds me of another song. This is, do you remember this song, Baby Come Back? Do you remember that song? I don't know, it just jumped to mind. Baby Come Back, you can do it on me. I don't even know I don't even know who that is, but, George Rafferty, right down the line. That's ELO. Gosh, now my mind's bouncing all over. So the thing is, I guess early 80s stuff in the car would be, and then kind of piled onto that 60s stuff. I mean, Billy Joel, Elton John. So I know that was stuff I was hearing, in the car at that time, whatever era of Billy Joel and Elton John that would have been. So that would have been the back end of your question. Does it influence me? I mean, I'm sure. Now that I've said some of that stuff, I'm not sure I want to admit that, what of that stuff is influencing me, but, I actually love those. So the late 70s, early 80s, that time, I imagine is hugely influential for me in terms of how I really appreciate music, let alone, put aside my own writing of it, just stuff that I know I dig listening to, but it's totally different stuff. So what happened was, later in life, when I went back and started really getting into music, I think the first stuff, in high school and college that I was really just totally drawn to was like late 70s Brit pop into the early 80s, like new wave New York scene. So this would be like XTC, Squeeze,
yes,
Elvis, sort of early Elvis Costello, Graham Parker, and then Talking Heads. Obviously found my way then a little bit, a couple of years reaching back. It wasn't technically Brit pop, but Peter Gabriel, early solo albums, David Bowie. So those eras are enormously probably shaping for me as a listener for sure. Kind of really interesting chord progressions, pretty sophisticated pop sensibility for most of those folks I just referenced. And I know that influences my writing still, even if I can't point to particular people. I just know that I liked it so much, and the progressions and the sort of way it made me think, as much as I felt good listening to it, I liked tunes that made me hear it 5 times before I felt like I really got it. If you listen to XTC, I think that's a good model for that. And so I don't think anybody would say I sound like XTC, so I feel safe saying that, but that kind of attitude towards songwriting, I think, shows up in most everything I write. That, in fact, sometimes it's almost hard for me. I just need to pare it down and be like, okay, let's keep it to a few chords, Cole, a few chords. There don't need to be 18 sections to each song, that kind of thing. So, and it still shows up. So like there are tunes even on this record, I used to do it even more, where there'll be, verse, chorus, bridge, chorus. That's your conventional pop structure. My song might go, actually the song you guys, Meredith, you had premiered the Clay, that tune.
Yeah.
That song's a mess. That song goes, It goes verse, really slow developing verse, chorus, verse, slightly different chorus, a different section, I guess we could call the bridge, sort of another part B to the bridge. Then it goes back to the verse, and then it goes to an entirely new two sections at the end. So it never even hits the chorus, the second half of the song. And again, that's super challenging. I mean, I can't imagine, being a listener trying to grab onto that the first time is I'm sure it's a little strange, but I guess that's what I gravitate towards.
Well, a little strange. We're all okay with that.
Yeah, right. So that's how it shows. Yeah, so definitely those eras show up. And even the stuff I was mentioning, I mean, does some of that stuff that I was exposed to, some of which I still, would absolutely listen to, but does ELO or Hall & Oates, Little River Band, I'm sure this stuff somehow shows up in my music, though if somebody called me like soft rock, I'm sure I'd be insulted. So I should veer away.
We would never.
Please don't, Meredith.
Well, and I did want to know, for your videos for Window and for Flood, the concepts of having them have an array of different clips kind of put together, and some overlays and stuff are similar, but the type of clips you have are different. So like for Window, it was like wildlife and overlays of singing. And so I just wondered how the concept for each of those videos came about, and production wise on that, like how involved you were with it.
Well, that was entirely me, so I was definitely involved. There's nobody else involved.
I figured.
So yeah, a bit of a control freak, I guess. But so both those tunes, I guess this would get into the broader kind of lyrical themes of the album, but just generally, we could circle back to this. Carnival Barkers, really all the tunes in some way relate to what I would view to be kind of the psychology of kind of what's been happening politically, just like stuff I'm interested in, whether it's how, kind of a Pied Piper sort of effect that's happening, kind of what exactly are we following and why, what are the motives of the charmer, so to speak, and or the influencer, let's say,
right.
and then on the other hand, what would it be like to be sort of in a place where you feel really powerless, given what's happening. And so there's a few tunes, one pretty explicitly called Helpless, but there's a couple others that kind of get at those themes more. One is called Muggers. So on its face, it looks like it's a song about, being mugged potentially, though it's the poppiest whistle along tune, which is intense. But it's really, again, about this powerlessness, sort of give the muggers what they want. And so to your question, Flood and Window are two tunes where really the angle, there's variations on the main theme, is just how much sort of group differences were played up, let's say, by Trump and others, and how they then, exploited that, fear mongering, basically exploiting it for political, sort of power gains. I mean, I think early on there was question, okay, is Trump really saying some of this stuff about, Mexicans coming over and raping, et cetera, that stuff back in 2016, which is when I was writing this stuff. So, is he really, does he believe this stuff? Is he, at that point, what was clear is clearly he was using it to stoke a particular, sort of, almost increase people's attention to the differences between folks in terms of ethnicity, race, et cetera, and then pouncing on that for political gain. So that's what Flood and Window both are trying to speak to. Flood, which is the first thing that came out, single-wise, and the video, there I really focused on historical clips and tried to contrast some stuff. So I can be very specific. It was pretty wild, actually. I found this is all public domain stuff. So in searching, I found this thing. It turns out it's from I think it's 57, about, and it's a Red Book, which I don't even know if Red Book magazine still exists.
Right.
But if it does, they had put together I think basically a marketing pitch, which was, this 30-minute or something video that's basically picturing white suburbia and how advertisers could sell to them. So it was all this, sort of shots of sort of moving down. The opening clip is from that in the video where, a car is driving down and these kind of neighbors are all looking at the camera at the car passing by.
Right.
And it's sort of this, and then contrasting. So the song is basically, so the first lines, I wish I had the lyrics in front of me, or something like, they love the way you make them feel about their homes. And so it's kind of political, right? So this idea that people are made to feel good about their own situation, and then contrasting it with others. So it goes on to say, lose hope, lose face, you do what you can to win a race. I mean, it's in my mind, it's very political, right? Just whatever it takes, even if it's drumming up whatever sort of hostility and fear you need to drum up, so be it. And so there's a clip of some folks who are associated with really problematic policies, to say the least. I think I can't remember if the clip was George Wallace or whatever. There are a couple of clips in car, politicians in cars, and then it says, "Here comes the flood." So again, it's provoking, like it's a problem. Here comes the flood, and it talks about going to the Capitol steps with their rage, et cetera, et cetera. I won't go through all the lyrics,
Right.
but and so I was trying to show that instead, I flip over to clips in that video of things like the march on the Selma marches, and the Little Rock integration process, which weirdly enough, I didn't even realize till I was looking this up. That's actually 57 as well. So it's the same. So the clips from the integration where you see the kids, the high schoolers, sort of being, taunted and attacked and all that in the clips. That's actually the same year that Red Book was putting out that sort of other stuff. Yeah, it's pretty wild. So, did I know nobody would know that as they watched? Of course, but to me it was interesting. So yeah, that was really trying to get at this notion of exploiting fear of the other, with this notion of ethnicity and race being how we were defining the other. And the clips were largely keying on race in terms of the historical clips used. At the end, though, I did use the Charlie Chaplin, the immigrant. And so the only thing that wasn't like a straight up history kind of clip was the Charlie Chaplin sort of sequence, because I was trying to explicitly bring in more about immigration as well. And there's also a clip of folks landing at Ellis Island from I think it's the 1920s. It's pretty grainy, but that's in there earlier as well. So that was Flood. Flood's very much kind of the historical clips. And, clearly the narrator, I guess that's me. I mean, I kind of bounce back and forth I view the flood to be, I think it's a cleansing. It's a good thing, right? Here comes the flood. So it's this idea of playing with that phrase, here comes the flood, in two different ways. I think it is more comes the flood to what's the line? I don't remember. I wish I had my own lyrics, but to wash the banks of blood. Right. So basically this idea that it's cleansing, that it's useful for our society, whereas the people kind of going down to the State House, pumping their fists in the lyric, are more kind of viewing it as a really dangerous thing. There's a flood that's going to kill us. It's going to overwhelm us. So that's what I was playing with, this sort of duality of that. And Window, there it was much more, it was really more playing up the immigration piece there. I think there's a line, one of the last lines is dreamers that frighten. And dreamers, I was trying to play on the idea of the dreamers, right, of the Dreamer Act and all that. We need to find a way to sort of deal with dreamers that frighten and places that tighten at night. So the window is really a wall. So it's this idea of, do you see through it? Do you view it as a barrier? Can you move through it? Can you find your way to the other side of this thing? Do you feel trapped, etc.? So the video itself, there I went out. So a lot of the stuff that's in that video, I just went out. I live near a kind of a state park area, and I just went out and found there's this really cool area. I don't have to walk that far to get to. I don't know, like in maybe an hour, and it has like these old abandoned mills with all these, decaying like brick stuff with trees that have fallen with huge roots. So you may see in the video, you may remember where there's sort of color to some of the video, and it's like of a tree root and the brick. So that's all just kind of me with it, shooting that, and then playing with that, trying to the birds you mentioned, the birds, the preening. So this is I was trying to get at again this idea almost of squawking, of these like symbolic, like just like the attitude of certain birds I even used, and I don't know. So I think there the animal life was more trying to get at sort of characterizing how people were giving voice to certain positions. So that's where that was. So I didn't want it to just be a redo of Flood, and that's why I went in different direction with that. But I really like I'm definitely, as you can see, not one to have a video be me, singing to the camera or being on camera. I really wanted, I saw the album as being all linked, as I said, like thematically, and I really wanted whatever videos there were going to be, I wanted them to absolutely be about that material. And I didn't see how I could be in it, or kind of a conventional thing now, and have it be about what I wanted it to be about. So that's the direction I went. Yeah.
I love the inclusivity that you took the same common theme across with that, and also that you put so much into each of these tracks, because I'm telling you, sometimes I ask people questions. I'm like, what's this song about? And they're just like, love. And I'm like, oh, any particular inspiration? And they're like, love. I'm like, all the love I've had. So it's very fascinating to me that it's not even just love. I mean, it's specific examples of history, and it's just very, very interesting. So thank you for that. It's
absolutely. Thanks. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Well, thank you for being interested in it. Yeah, cool. I think a lot of people would rather hear people say it's just about love.
No.
I don't think I have one of those. Well, there's none of those tunes on this record for sure. I'm sure somewhere in my deep catalog back when I was listening to soft rock, there's a love song somewhere, but I'd have to dig very, very far.
We kind of got a very good glimpse into what inspired the album and the tracks within it, but what was the writing and recording process like for you? Do you start with a concept and lyrics? Do you start with instrumentals? How does that all come into play for you?
It was really different this time around. So for Carnival Barkers, the process was really the first time I used the approach I guess I'll describe to you. I mean, before that, I would do what I guess would be viewed as a much more traditional songwriter approach, or at least singer-songwriter approach, is I'd, sit at the keyboard at a piano, right, or with a guitar in my lap, and I'd sort of construct a song, usually chord progressions and melodies first, and then lyrics would come last. And I'd usually, the process of lyric writing was usually the slowest, and it definitely was the final sort of piece. And what happened was in kind of late 2015, early 2016, after this hiatus I'd referenced earlier from doing any songwriting, when I got back into it, one of the ways I got back in was by exploring sort of home recording, doing my own recording, my own tracking. I had not done that previously, so I'd gone into a studio after I had a song completed. And so sort of, I'd bring whoever was playing with me, let's say the band, into the studio, and we'd kind of like layer things, and the arrangement would come after the song, in essence, was already written. And then you had studio time, which you're paying for and is you have to be really efficient and not a lot of rewriting. It's like, oh, that bridge sucks, but I don't have time to fix it, you know? So that was the process before. And I really liked the idea of trying, if I was going to get back into this, to have the ability to just spend whatever time I wanted, not be concerned about the clock and money and that kind of stuff. So the home recording thing appealed to me. I didn't know crap about it. So I dove in early 2016. And as I was making my way, I mean, really trying to just figure out how to even do it. Like I had never been exposed to the software, you know, so Pro Tools, that kind of thing. I'm not using Pro Tools, but I really was a novice with all that. So I got my software and stuff I needed to be able to feed what I was using instrument-wise into that software and got going with it. And that was like spring of 2016. And at that time, of course, the nomination process was playing out, you know, so Trump was leading the pack. And, you know, the election was still a good, 7-8 months ahead, but the writing was kind of on the wall with some of the stuff. So what was happening was I was still writing music first. So by the time, though, I wouldn't wait till all the tunes were done. What would happen is I'd have a couple tunes I felt maybe is happening now with, I mentioned earlier that there's a new batch of songs I'm already starting to work on, and I've probably got at least 3 or 4 that are almost musically done, but I haven't even started thinking about, I have no clue what the lyrical content's going to be. So, so back in 2016, I had 2 or 3, and I remember one of the first ones was Flood. And I basically was tracking that and got to a point where I was like, well, what can I do with this, lyrically? And this whole exploitation of sort of fear of the other was very much on my mind as far as just paying attention to the news and sort of just, kind of scratching my head about what was going on. And so that was the first lyric I wrote. And what I realized after writing that and thinking about how much other stuff was jumping to mind for me was that I really started to think of the project as one, just kind of a statement, like, of having something lyrically to keep coming back to, that all the tunes would somehow relate in some way to these themes. And the Carnival Barkers idea came pretty early. I realized later, after I had that title, that was the working title for most of the time I was working on the album, which helped me think about what the songs were going to be about, right? So the overall, sort of like a book, it's Carnival Barkers. What are the individual chapters, lyrically? And then I remember Obama used that term Carnival Barkers to describe, or Carnival Barker to describe Trump or politicians like that. And I almost veered away from then that term because I didn't want it to sound like I was just riffing off of someone else, but I stuck with it. And so that's what happened lyrically. That came last. Musically, the process, I'm going to try to be careful not to bore you too much with this, but that I think, that became one of the more interesting things for me just in terms of the creative process, because it allowed me to do something I'd never done before. This is a songwriter. So I sat down and I'd start, I'd be at the keyboard sort of feeding into the software. And because you can immediately track, right? I used to be able to do this on mini disc or whatever, but this is super easy, right? So I just have a sound up, a Rhodes or whatever. I'd play, and maybe I'd just be goofing around and I'd like a progression of, 4 to 6 chords or something that I dug, and I'd just track it. And I wouldn't overthink it. I just have those 4 to 6 chords. And then because I was learning the software, I thought I really need to figure out how to use like the percussion stuff. I have very specific ideas about percussion, more than I should have. My drummer friends probably think I have way too many ideas as far as percussion ideas. So, but anyhow, so I started, drumming in essence with my hands. So I had a, pad, MIDI pad that I could use. So I would just basically be using my hands instead of sticks, because I'm not a drummer. I'm not a percussionist. But that ended up, so I basically figure out a percussion part that I liked. I wouldn't use loops. I wouldn't create like a measure and then loop it. I was trying to play. And so I thought there was a decent amount of variety to it. And it got to the end of, let's say, that 4 or 6 chords. And I thought, well, now I'm thinking totally differently about what the melody should be or what the next section should be. And so I quickly realized that whatever I was doing rhythmically was totally changing how I approached the melody and even thinking about where I wanted the song to go terms of the chords, which surprised me. And so that's how I ended up writing really almost, I think, all the songs. I wouldn't really move through a whole song. I would take a section, allow the texture, like get a feel. It just gave me a feel in a way I had not really previously had. Okay, this is what the song is. This is totally changing my melodic approach. And so I'm going to go in this direction now. And that kept happening. And then I would get far enough where I would track a vocal. I would always have a dummy vocal line, like, a rough vocal, but it wouldn't be words. It'd be me, mumbling or humming a few words. And then, a phrase would click that would be related to the theme. And then I'd build outward from there.
Got it.
Lyrically. So that's how it kind of came together. And that's actually the process I'm still using for this next batch that I've started to work on. And yeah, I really enjoy it. I mean, creatively, it's, I find it really interesting that how much each arrangement component is impacting the actual songwriting. I think I previously just approached arranging like something I added on at the end. Like, okay, here's the song. Now, what do I want the drums and bass and whatever to be doing? And now it's absolutely informing the writing itself.
That's so cool to see it change like that in any musician's career, especially, but just the way that you approach it now, I haven't heard many people approach it that specific way. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, thanks. And thanks for, hearing all that out.
Absolutely. Knowing that you're into like political dynamics and in America and the psychology of all of it. And so I just wondered, and I'm going to ask this, and I'm going to include aliens in it, but it's not going to have anything to do with aliens. If outer space aliens exist, what do you think is their impression of America right now?
Of America?
Yeah.
Of America specifically? Yeah, I don't know if it's just an American issue. If outer space aliens exist and they're actually aware of Americans, right, they're way, way beyond where we are. So probably even if we get past all this, we're going to look like a bit of a trifle to them. So I don't know that they would take all, and, maybe they've dealt, if they're that advanced, they've already probably dealt with a lot of this stuff. If they're at all like, conscious in the way we're conscious, they probably wrestled with all this kind of psychologically destructive stuff and came out, survived long enough to be seeing us from outer space. So maybe they realize we'll get to the other side of this. But probably, somewhat bemused. Maybe they look back on their own history and sort of sickened if they had, relatives who were involved in some of this stuff. I don't know. But, so I think, hopefully they would have, a perspective on it all that allows for them to look back and the fact that they exist would be a good sign for us because maybe we all pull through all this stuff.
Right. Boy, I'm hoping. I'm just over here like, am I going to have the energy for it?
Right. Yeah, it's tough. I mean, yeah, it's really tough. I have, to the specific issues around even the stuff I was talking about with flood and window. And my own parents are both first generation immigrants to the country. One, a refugee from, my mom came over from Hungary, Budapest, Hungary. My dad came over from Italy. And it's so interesting now as you look over to that, side of the pond and in Hungary, there's a, very right-leaning, anti-immigrant, it's just sort of wild seeing, this country my mom came from where, and she, of course, thinks much like me on these issues of immigration, but her own, family back there and the belief system that a lot of folks are operating with out there is just so different. I mean, so when I say it's not just an American thing, I mean, there are many countries that seem to be tilting in this sort of direction. But anyhow.
I don't know if this question is going to make too much sense, but I haven't because I have been so focused on this microcosm of America, I haven't looked as specifically at other countries and what's happening. And so I just wonder if you could put into layman's terms, perhaps, or, you know, in a way that I can at least understand how, like, what you see as the psychology worldwide with everything that's happening politically.
That'd be right. It's another 5-hour podcast, and also me doing a bunch of research before we have the podcast. I mean, I will say so. You know, one thing I got to be careful about, you know, overreaching, right? That's part of the issue is assuming too much. I mean, I remember with the nomination thing when that was going on, I remember having the thought, as you know, many did, just like, well, if you were like me, viewing Trump as somebody who was potentially dangerous and had ideas that really were inconsistent with your own worldview, let's say, okay, that in a way you could be like, well, that's fine. If he ends up at the top of this, you know, sort of at the end and he's the nominee, I mean, how on earth could he win a general election, right? I mean, I remember, you know, Rudy, you know, actually, you know, thinking, oh, this would be much better than Cruz or Rubio or whatever, because that's fine. You know, it won't, there's no way that'll translate into the general electorate. There's like a base within this part. Right. So, right. I mean, that thought reflects the thoughts of, you know, millions of people at that time. Right. And then of course, like, holy crap, right? I mean, and I guess part of what I'm getting at is no matter how much you are trying to be thoughtful or think you understand, I mean, and I'm a working psychologist. I mean, so, and yet, like many millions of, including many psychologists, we're political scientists, all kind of surprised, which really, I think, points to, you know, the complexity of this, trying to answer this in a small amount of time. There's just no way. It speaks to, among other things, how difficult it is to really get someone else's or some other group's perspective on something, you know?
Yeah.
That no matter how much I think I kind of get where person X or group X is coming from, I don't. I mean, I can try. I mean, you know, but one thing I wrestle with a lot as a psychologist is, in doing clinical work, I'm talking to people a lot about their individual belief systems, you know, their expectations, their beliefs, what are, you know, usually called schemas, right? And so there's so many assumptions we all have, thousands and thousands of these beliefs that are just activated in all sorts of ways, and we don't know that they're biasing and shaping our thoughts and feelings at any given point, but they are. And to imagine you really can get your arms around what somebody else's beliefs are enough to explain such a large phenomenon is tough. I think people hit on angles, you know, particular angles. So the angle I hit on, or I try to, was more of the angle I know a little bit about, which is sort of social psychology, clinical psychology. So I thought I could speak a little bit to the helplessness, powerlessness, sort of anxiety piece. I thought I could speak a little bit to the social psych piece around, you know, this in-group, out-group dynamic, where I really do think there's some intent around almost heightening our awareness of, like, you know, this is your identity. We're going to make your identity even more saliently this, whether it's, you know, white or whatever. And that way you pay more attention to that as a marker of when you see someone who's not part of that group. And we know from social psychology for the last 50, 60 years of research minimally that as soon as you do that, people are going to be more discriminatory towards the outgroups. And it's just a fact. You can go to things that aren't even, you know, they're more commonly, you know, you see in the media. Like, I remember, I wish I could remember her name, the teacher from the, you can Google it easy, so can the listeners. But basically, she did that whole sort of, you know, blue-eyed, brown-eyed sort of project with her class, and it was filmed, and I'm trying to remember, it was part of a series. And as soon as she basically brought attention to these elementary school kids' eye color, something they had never thought about, she was trying to make a point about prejudice and discrimination, right? They immediately started treating people with the other eye color quite differently, right? And this is not a controlled experiment. This isn't like other stuff that, you might read about, but it's just harder to access in the mainstream. That's a pretty common phenomenon. As soon as your awareness is pointed in a certain direction, like this is an important variable to define yourself by, we tend immediately to treat people who are not part of that, in that category, with greater hostility. We're biased towards them. And then you add the history in terms of race and ethnicity. I mean, that's brown eyes, blue eyes. I mean, nobody has any preconceived beliefs about brown eyes versus blue eyes, right? And that's part of the point is you could do this with something pretty trivial. You add this history, you add people's sort of own sort of ties to sort of long-standing, whether it's religious or political beliefs, and it's incredibly powerful, I think, and that doesn't even get into things like tribe and, still, if you look, I think the recent thing I just saw, 538 when they're putting out polls, I think it's only 88% or something people who are Republicans who are registered in a sample, registered Republicans, think Trump's doing a bang up job. So, I mean, how much do we pull away from our tribe? You know what I mean? So like, right. So there's that, there's just, hey, you vote your tribe. There are issues, I think, around race and ethnicity and the social psych stuff I was talking about, the fear, exploitation, the socioeconomic stuff that's been referenced. So, but yeah, it's probably, 150 factors trying to explain them all. And you somehow get Trump. Yeah. By the way, that's the other thing. It's the psychologist. That's the other thing. I think the thing I was most struck by, aside from the general election, was like way off music here, but I mean the thing I was struck by was how people either didn't see really early on how narcissistic this guy is, right? I mean, like you could see it from a mile away. Like my perspective as a psychologist, you could hear him before he was even running for president, you'd be like, wow, that dude is really self-involved and going to do X, Y, and Z because he's pretty predictably narcissistic and all this stuff, right? And it's pretty obvious. And so either like were people not really attuned to that, or B, just don't give a shit. Which blows my mind.
Right. I'm like, that's
like if you were interacting. Yeah, if you're interacting with someone like that in your personal life, you are going to immediately run away, right? I mean, like, I don't know. I just think, if you've had any experience with people who are really demonstrating that stuff, I mean, it's difficult. I just can't believe we put someone in charge of the country like that, So whatever.
That's me because like I can't verbalize these thoughts because I'm just sitting here going, what? How? Okay. So thank you for actually understanding what I'm trying to get at. I greatly appreciate you taking time with us today. And I know that you've got a lot coming up for you. And I just wanted to know, is there anything else that you'd like to hype to our audience or to maybe drop a little nugget of wisdom before we're done here?
I've dropped too many nuggets of something. I won't drop a nugget of anything, but I will say, if your listeners have hung in there and through this interview and are still listening, I really would love it if you'd give a listen to the album, maybe two, and it's called Carnival Barkers, and it means a lot to me, and hope the next album is going to materialize within the next year.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Cole. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Meredith, thank you, and you as well. Hope to be in touch down the line.